CEO show. Roundtable. Welcome. Welcome and good afternoon across America and across the world. What an extraordinary time. A little uncertainty on the political horizon, a lot of pressure with COVID and health, the pressure on women and their lives as business leaders and taking care of children and families. But an extraordinary time of change for women business leaders. What a time to stop and reflect and learn from women business leadership at the top, women CEOs. And today we have 4 incredible CEOs of different perspectives. And we're proud to welcome you and hear the stories and the leadership. First, just a quick note on WBC. You all saw the Women's CEO report that we put out by the end of October, showing 7.8% women CEOs at the top. And with the appointment of the new CEO of CVS Health, we've reached 8%, and we're going to keep pushing. Every time there's a new woman CEO named, we push it out with support from Catalyst and C200. You will see that on Monday, we release the first of a monthly report called WBC's Women Joining Public Boards. We're doing this with Equilar. What is so exciting as you all read at the report? You remember a year ago, we were 20%, 22% women on boards. This shows in October, 40.2% of board seats were appointed with women. And we have profiled 123 women for 125 new seats. And with it, finally good news for women of color. Of those that proclaimed they're women of color, 44, that means that 33 of them were Black women for the first time on corporate boards. So with that, we are saying that we are saluting, we're watching the data, and we are congratulating women like the 4 that we've got today. Our next major call will be December 2nd for GDKA. That's between Catalyst, Working Mother Media, and WBC. And you'll have 4 major CEOs, 2 men and 1 woman, talk about measuring change. So a big salute now to Robert Reiss, who's CEO of the CEO Show and the CEO Forum and on our board, and Becky SHAMBAUGH, the CEO of SHAMBAUGH Leadership, also on WBC board. But before that, let's just think about who's on today very quickly. Our friend is clearly Stacey Stewart, CEO March of Dimes. We were both president of the same high school, I think a few years before her, Stacey. But what you've done in the private sector and now March of Dimes. To Shoshana Grove, you'll hear her story. She started out as a mail carrier, if you can believe that. And Gina Drosos, she's running the largest retail store for jewelry, Signet. And thank you, Robert, for the nomination. And to Cara Goldin is a real name. And we will hear from her, but she's certainly undoubted, and she's certainly in leadership with major recognition. So we turn this over now to Robert and Becky, but honoring in the tradition, but this time 4 major CEOs, a real hats off, gratitude to you, Robert and Becky.
All right, Edie, thank you. And let's just pause and thank you for your vision for WBC and your inspiration in galvanizing so many people across this country to support a mission that's actually, we are faster together, right? And the progress that we've made is incredible. It's just a real honor to be, part of this conversation today. And the CEO Roundtable is really a unique forum that brings together exceptional executive leaders. And we happen to have, as Edie said, 4 women CEOs who are exceptional. But also what's interesting is that work within 4 different sectors in the government, the entrepreneurial side, the nonprofit, and the corporate, if you will, executive leadership. So welcome. I know Edie's already given us an intro to who all the folks are, so why don't we get started? And Robert, my co-host, welcome. Good to have you be a part of the forum as well. So the first question, and Stacey, how are you, Stacey? Good to see you there.
I'm doing great. Great to see you all.
Thank you so much for carving out the time. I've known you for a number of years, but I think I would say one thing around your brand is you are a turnaround expert, right? And have, worked in several organizations, but really focusing on and handling millions and billions of dollars to really transform company organizations, operations, and their culture and, and people, right? So as the CEO of the March of Dimes, congratulations on that role. And being in the corporate side a little bit too and working, is there a big difference here? I've had people ask me, is there a big difference in leading in the corporate institutions versus a nonprofit? That'll be the first question I just wanted to ask you for today.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Becky. And first of all, thank you all for having me. And it's great to be on with so many amazing friends and so many amazing women. And Edie will be proud of me that I attended my 40th anniversary reunion high school call today. So I'm still actively engaged 40 years later. It's shocking to think that I'm 40 years out from high school, but there it is. So, I think, Becky, the question is really great because a lot of people tend to think of nonprofit leadership as something entirely different and a little bit less stressful and less hard charging than for-profit leadership. And I just have to tell you, I've worked in both. I've worked in companies, I've worked in nonprofit, and essentially the kinds of leadership skills and the kinds of strategic questions and the kinds of issues that come up in the for-profit side are exactly like the nonprofit side. At the March of Dimes, we have a lot of corporate partners. I have a lot of conversations with CEOs of companies who, and we have amazing conversations and share amazing stories and interesting perspectives, and see a lot of the same challenges in similar ways and are addressing them in similar ways. And so one of the things that I have really understood is that the role that I play as the CEO of a major national nonprofit is all about strategy and vision and leadership and talent and dealing with technology issues and dealing with the pressures on how to attract more revenue and all of those things and how to be relevant in this marketplace, right? All of those things are the same thing that I struggle with and deal with on a daily basis. And then, of course, we're in the midst of a pandemic and everything has just been made so much more complicated. I mean, in the nonprofit sector, of course, a lot of us have faced a lot of pressure on revenue, not unlike a lot of companies that are facing incredible pressure, small businesses all the way to large corporations. There's some that are doing well throughout this time period, we know, and then a lot of us are, really struggling to make it through to 2021 to make sure that we can survive through that period of time and actually even come out on the back end really thriving. And then I would also just say that, for a woman of color, it's been a very interesting time with all of the social unrest in the world. It's really helped to shine a spotlight on the issues of diversity and inclusion that we still are struggling with in this country. And as we know in the nonprofit sector, we've got a lot of issues with diversity too. We have 75% of the workforce at nonprofits are women, but only a smaller percentage are actually CEOs. And it's even a smaller percentage of women CEOs who are women of color like me. So when I look around, I don't have a lot of folks that look like me. So here I am, waving the flag. But I do think we're making some progress, but it certainly is my job at the March Times to ensure that we can build a high performing workforce that is diverse, that is reflective of America, that includes women of all types, of all races and all ethnicities. And I think I'm in a unique position to sort of do that as a woman myself, having gone through many of those struggles, both in the for-profit sector and the nonprofit sector as well.
I would agree. And it sounds like a lot of what the themes are is strategy, of course, but it's really around people, talent, right? It's really around the equity piece of that. So I'm going to turn it over to Robert, and I think Robert's going to take a deeper dive on the equity piece with you. Robert?
Yeah, so hi. So Stacey, you had mentioned before about how few women CEOs are non-for-profits. And you and I have spoken about this, that it's really disproportionate, the amount for the amount of people involved, and especially women of color. So talk about really your strategy in what you're doing at March of Dimes to drive equity, gender equity, and diversity and inclusion.
Well, it's so interesting. Again, the similarity between the nonprofit sector and the for-profit sector. We're talking about diversifying boards. Why? Because we need to have women at the table, making decisions, helping companies to succeed. That is the same thing in the nonprofit sector. There are many nonprofit boards, especially large national, global nonprofits, that are not as diverse as they need to be. And so one of the things that I'm doing is like starting at the top of the house, right? Working with my chair of my board right now, and identifying opportunities for new voices, new roles, women, people of color to serve in the spots on our board, so that we have that diversity of thought at the highest level in the organization, and that I have partners who bring that sense of inclusion, that importance of inclusion to our strategic thinking as an organization. But then as we go through the organization, we're doing everything we can to ensure that every single position that we hire for has a diverse pool of women, of people of color, building that into our policies in every position in the organization, supporting our employees with employee resource groups. I mean, these are things that companies have been doing for a long time. We have, again, about 75% of our workforce are women. We need to make sure that that people, LGBTQ plus individuals, and African-American employees and Hispanic employees and others feel like they can bring their full selves to work, right? When they come to March of Dimes. And why do we need to do that? Because in our work around maternal infant health, we have a huge issue around health inequities in this country. We have Black women that die at a rate of 3 to 4 times that as compared to white women in this country, shockingly. In the US, we're considered the most dangerous developed nation in the world in which to give birth, and it's especially true for women of color. We have infant mortality inequities where Black babies die at a rate of twice that of white babies. If we don't have a workforce and a board that reflects the communities that we serve, we will absolutely not be able to effectively serve those communities. So it's my job. It's a business imperative as the CEO of the March of Dimes, as well as just the right thing to do, to ensure that we have all of the efforts around inclusion and diversity for women, people of color at every level in the organization, and it becomes an organizational priority.
I like how you're driving process into everything, because that's how you create predictable results. Becky?
To add to that complexity, Stacey, is on top of building process, we've seen an exodus of numbers of women leaving organizations. And, I think the pandemic is just like taking the Band-Aid off, right? I think so many things have come to the surface and are so much more visible. These losses, these exits are not only losses for the women, but also losses for organizations, right? So
absolutely.
What advice first do you have for women to really navigate this new terrain? Because I think 8 months ago was the normal, right? And then I think now we're moving into a new normal. We're not going to necessarily go back to what was the organizational architecture.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I guess that question is, what advice do you have for women? I'm sure you've mentored them. Maybe you've experienced this yourself, right? But what can women do? And the second question, is what can organizations do? But let's hear about your advice for women.
So what I would say is, and here I've got a complaining dog in my background, so sorry if she's disturbing you, if you can hear it. Hopefully you can't. But here's the thing: we have, at the March Times, I'm obviously a woman. I'm also a mom, and I know what this time has been like for women in the workplace to try to maintain the job, continue to be a breadwinner in the household, to succeed at work, to deal with the issues around kids potentially at home, distance learning, a pandemic. I think women have been pushed to a breaking point this year, unfortunately. And the decisions that many women have made to say, I cannot continue on in this way. Frankly, I do think we saw a lot of women who felt that way show up at the polls in November and express their frustration, express their feeling of being overwhelmed, with their vote this year. But I think the issue still remains that we have got to, as women, express to our employers, express to our bosses what we need in order to continue to succeed at work, what we need to our companies to do to help us be better both at work and at home. One of the things we did at the March of Dimes is we convened a group early in the pandemic, a group of our employees to say, tell us what's going on at home. Talk to us about what your needs are with distance learning. What are you struggling with at home? Has your spouse or your partner lost their job? What does it mean? What kind of leave can we provide? What kind of flexibilities can we provide? We went through a whole relooking at what we could do to help our employees manage through this pandemic. We know the pandemic won't last forever. What we really were hoping is that women wouldn't make a rash decision to just leave the job when, who knows, in a few months, we might be, really, in fact, some of us are seeing a little bit of the light in the tunnel. And why make that decision to really derail a career or move off of a different path in terms of your career when employers could be giving much more of a short-term flexibility or help? The biggest thing women can do, raise your voice. I don't know how many times I have to continue to say this in the workplace. Women's voices are important. If you don't speak up and say, here's what I'm struggling with, here's what I need, sometimes your employers, especially, I hate to say it, if they're not women, may not be as attuned to it. They may not be listening in the same way. They may not hear the same way. So it's really helpful to come with constructive ideas on what the situations are that we're facing, what potential solutions may exist. That's the first step to creating some real change. And we have to recognize we have that power. If we can make change at the ballot box, we can certainly make it within our organizations and our companies as well. And I think we have to recognize that our voices really matter in that way.
Stacey, I don't think that could be any more important than what you just shared right now, because I think women need to believe that it's less about, no, I didn't know I could, to yes, I can. And I think as we move forward through this, we really are shaping the future. And to your point, I don't think sometimes we realize as women how much power we do have. So thank you for that. And thank you for your, and there's a lot of women on this call today that I think just that probably was it really resonated with them.
Absolutely.
And I think organizations need to create that safe environment to have that conversation, of course. Thank you, Stacey. Robert, I'm going to turn it over to you for our next panelist, if you will.
Absolutely. And thank you, Becky. And real excited because Gina Drosos has a great background in that, you were president of beauty at Procter & Gamble, which is one of the all-time best-run corporations. And right now, you're CEO of Signet Jewelers, the largest jewelry retailer in the world. And you've like 2,800 stores. Just before we get started, tell what the brands are so everyone understands that.
Great. Well, hi, Robert. Hi, everyone. Yes, Signet Jewelers is made up of a lot of names you, I think, would know. Kay Jewelers, Jared the Gallery of Jewelry, Zales, Piercing Pagoda. And we also in the US have an online retailer called JamesAllen.com. And then we're also the #1 jeweler in Canada with People's Jewelers, and in the UK with H. Samuels and Ernest Jones.
So let's go into what you're doing at Signet in terms of gender parity and how you're managing that. And you've some really strong numbers in terms of the number of women in executive positions.
Thank you. You know, we've made really great progress, and I think it's because we've made diversity and inclusion a business strategy, which it should be. You know, by definition, leaders cannot see their own blind spots, and so we all make better decisions when we surround ourselves with people who see the world through a different lens. And we believe that wholeheartedly at Signet. We have 7 out of our 12 executive team members are women. We're one of the few public companies that has gender parity on our board of directors. And in fact, 4 out of our 5 committee chairs are women. So women are playing a very strong role in leadership at the board level and the C-suite at Signet. But it really starts, I think, at our touch points with customers. We have about 75% of our store managers are women. And so they're leading that interaction that we have with our customers every day.
Well, congratulations on that. And I mean, what a great and interesting business to be in this time. And before you go, I'm going to ask you about the whole holiday season. But Becky, why don't you go into the whole leadership?
Well, thank you and congratulations. Well, what a huge track record and success that you Jenna, you've been able to accomplish. I'd like to take this more to a personal level. You've grown companies, you've worked for large corporations. You've had a successful track record. You've been given awards, the Fortune, most powerful women, and we could go on and on, right? But what are your top 2 pieces of advice that you have for women who are eager to continue to advance or grow in their career, or they're getting ready to start that company, or they're in the midst of scaling that? What advice do you have, or things that have worked for you personally that perhaps even continue to show up as key principles?
Sure. I think the first one I would say is advice that I give both to women and to men. But I think, when we have to be strong leaders, right? I mean, I think take in the data, listen to the different points of view, but be strong enough to set a very clear direction for your team. It's enabling, it's not constraining to have clarity of vision. And then I think be humble to realize that one leader does not do it all. I mean, we are all only as good as our team is around us. And so creating a culture where people can speak up, where differences are valued, not squelched, where people bring their whole selves to work, where contrary points of view can come up and be entertained and be embraced. That to me is really what's important. So strong enough to set the clear direction, and then humble to realize that leadership is a team effort.
So I'm going to ask you one more question on that, because when we're coaching a lot of women, sometimes they talk themselves out of speaking up, having a voice before they come to the meeting or they get on that Zoom. What has been your mindset that has encouraged and inspired you to speak up, maybe challenge assumptions, engage in sometimes challenging conversations to have our voice heard? I'm sure that, obviously that has been something you've been able to do.
I think we all build confidence over time, particularly as we, understand an industry or understand data. So a great place to start on that is areas where you already have a comfort zone. And then I think leveraging mentors. A lot of times I'll practice a conversation before I actually have it with a mentor, and it gives me the confidence to really step forward and take a stronger voice in that conversation that I would have otherwise.
Mentors, sponsors, so important, right?
Critically important, and both, right? I think sponsors are the ones who actively can help pull you through an organization, but you need the mentors too, who can tell you the unwritten rules and really help you see things that might be your blind spot.
Right. Thank you for that. Robert, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so Gina, you and I have spoken tons of times about things like how you've reinvented during COVID, and certainly retail was hit tremendously, but You did tell me, I think there are more actual proposals happening now, interestingly, but you've had this whole model that you've done where it's hybrid, everything's working. Talk about what's going to happen during the holiday season.
Right. Well, I mean, the first thing I'd say is one thing I now understand that I share with Stacey is a passion for transformation. We've been on a transformation journey at Signet for the last 3 years and have put just great infrastructure in place. We have tremendous people in our organization. And if anything, I would say we were more ready for the pandemic now, or, you know, back in March than we would have been several years ago. But we made a very fast pivot to serving our customers whenever and however they want to shop. We did that with stores closed, through curbside service, and through virtual selling consultants. We immediately, within a 48-hour period, empowered our store managers to become virtual jewelry consultants using their iPads from their living rooms to connect with our customers. And since then, we've hired over 300 dedicated virtual sellers. So anytime you want to learn about diamonds or jewelry or Zoom-worthy jewelry or, you know, gifts for the holidays, we can serve our customers wherever and however they want to shop. This holiday will be very interesting. It is much more e-commerce driven than we've ever seen before, even in categories that have been slow to move to e-commerce. So Signet is ready. We have 5 times the distribution capacity we did even 6 months ago. So we've been very aggressive on getting ready because we don't want anyone to not be able to celebrate life and express love this holiday. You know, relationships are more important than ever, I think, in a time like this. And we're certainly seeing that from our customer research. And as you said, engagements are up. I mean, people who've quarantined together, 93% of them say their relationship is the same or better than it was pre-quarantine. We also have a lot of new merchandise that we have ready for the holiday season. I think people are looking for, you know, that bright spot in what's been a really tough year. And I just echo what Edie said a few minutes ago. I think women have been particularly hard hit during this pandemic. Especially young moms who are trying to homeschool and do their jobs, you know, from their office at home and everything else. And it's a, you know, wonderful time to respect and recognize them this holiday. I think a lot of people will be thinking about the role that they've played that's so important in this year.
Well, Gina, continue to bring joy to people during this holiday season. And I bet with everyone on Zoom, everyone's going to need jewelry. It's not like my friend Tony Shea from Zappos, not as many people get new shoes now, but you are in the great business. Congratulations on increasing your distribution capacity 5 times. That's great. So a pleasure speaking with you again, Gina.
Great to speak to you too, Robert. Thanks for letting me be part of this. It's such a great forum.
Absolutely. So now, Becky.
All right.
Did I call you Becky? I mixed up back to you and Becky after a zillion times.
Things happen. Right. Thank you, Robert. Shoshana Grove, CEO of International Bridge. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. We also want to thank you for your leadership throughout the years for women in logistics. And people may not know that, or they may, that you were the president of the Executive Women in Government. So you've had a journey of being an successful executive leader, but also really has had a passion and a vision, and you've moved from conversation to action and really helping women to move the needle. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, of course. And I know you've served in many roles here, and I know now that you're at International Bridge, I think you've put your stake in the ground, an ambitious stake, but I know in you it's doable, to increase the number of women in the organization by a significant percent. So talk to that with us. And what are the, 1 or 2 things you think need to happen to make that a reality a year from now, right? Or 6 months from now, or whatever that sort of plan looks like for you?
Thank you so much. That's a really great question. I think, I feel kind of the way I had my path is you have to put folks in a position of responsibility where they can have ownership of big projects where they can shine. And part of that is just building a really great team, a diverse team, and then letting them run with their best ideas. And that's kind of the leadership style that I have. It's very different than the leadership style that I had in when I was in government or even in nonprofit, but we have the luxury in the private sector to do something a little differently. And I truly believe that if you get the right folks and put them in the right seats and truly enable them to do what they're passionate about, that your company will grow. And our company, we are fortunate to be very well positioned in a time that's been so difficult for so many, but for us, it's crazy. We have no rest because we're in e-commerce, and that's one of the sectors that's growing phenomenally right now. So we can't take our foot off the gas as far as supporting both our existing clients and all of those who want to come on and do business with us right now at this time when, as we've heard, people are needing to shift their business strategies.
So let me ask you the million-dollar question here. I could be wrong, but the international bridge industry has been very male-dominated for, some period of time. Is that, I don't know if that's a correct assumption, but given that men are key stakeholders in this circle of creating equity, gender equity, right? What has been your experience, or what advice could you give us today of how to bring men into the circle, have them be a participant, right? And to see the value and then really be part of the champion, your goal to achieve the equity and bringing more women up in the organization. What have you seen work? What is your thought there for us?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So as my sector is one of many sectors that is predominantly male, and since, as you stated, I started out as a letter carrier. I was one of 1% or less than 1% of letter carriers. And as I moved up, it was a very small percentage. And over that time, I reached out to other women. I worked with other women. We collaborated, we organized, we amplified each other, we supported each other. And I think within my company and within the organizations that I currently support, we continue to shine a light on the great work that all of us are doing, because women are phenomenal in the creativity, the leadership, the organization, the relationship building, in every aspect of the business. I think women in many, if not most cases, try a little harder, work a little better, and succeed a little more. And that, I think it's a matter of just really highlighting that. And within my company and within every leadership role I've had, I feel that women feel more comfortable if they know that there is a woman in leadership that they can reach out to, that they can talk to, or just to know that they're there in a supporting role. So we have some extremely talented women in my company, and I'm seeing them blossom and grow. And any one of them I would see in the next few years could be a senior executive or even a CEO of our company.
Yeah, that is great. I think it's less about the gender sort of conversation. It's more about shining the light on their greatness, right? Shining how they're impacting the business, right? And moving beyond labels, right, to the business at hand. And how I love your more inclusive sort of lens on how to create this balance of leadership, right? We're all in this together. Let's move beyond the gender piece. Let's really look at performance and how we can all complement each other. And then really featuring and highlighting that. I think it's very powerful. And I know it's going to work for you too, and it probably already is. So thank you for that. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. We're doing pretty well, so. happy about
Well, we'll
that.
check back in a year from now and we'll celebrate that. Robert, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Okay, thanks, Becky. So Sho, you're sort of what I would call a triple threat. You've led government, you've led non-for-profits, now you're leading profit organizations, public companies. So from all of these, what are like the overlaps? What are the common themes that resonate through all three, through the backbones of all three, in terms of being a good leader?
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's a great question. And I don't know so much as about being a good leader. I hope I've been a good leader, but in terms of being successful in my endeavors, I think first of all, just working really, really hard is very important, and I know everyone here has worked extremely hard to get where they are. But I think leveraging relationships is something that has been an overlap between the three sectors that I've been in. So in government, as I was very active in any type of employee outreach, employee involvement, diversity and inclusion. I volunteered for everything that I could in those areas because I always felt it was so important. I worked first as vice president and then as president and immediate past president of Executive Women in Government. We worked closely with OPM on the goals of getting more women into the senior executive positions, and we established there a mentoring program that has been going on for 6 years with over 100 graduates of that mentoring program to move women into the SES. And then as those women move into the SES and become more senior in their career, these women are prime candidates to become corporate CEOs or to go on public corporate boards, because in many cases, these women are generals. They have huge budgets, huge thousands of folks that they manage, and incredible leadership skills, and also just the amount of transparency, compliance, regulatory responsibility that those of us who were in government had transfers very well to the private sector and to the financial accountability that you have there in senior executive leadership. So, but I think as I moved from government and the nonprofit work that I did there into the private sector, I think one of the reasons that I was so happy to do that and wanted to do that was because of the relationships that I had built in my industry over time, and that I truly love and care about the people in my industry that I've worked with for decades. And I didn't want to leave that behind. And I've been able to continue to work with those folks as I've transitioned into the private sector. And I think it's been good.
That is terrific. And congratulations on the important work you've done in all areas of work. So now we have our finale, which is going to be, which Becky, you are going to introduce, but I just want to first say before this about Kara Goldin, that her book is absolutely awesome. I have it here, I'm reading it. Actually, my wife, Barbara, was reading it, and she doesn't read this type of book as much, but it's so cool because it's these snippets of stuff that you could never imagine people could actually do. It's like one of the most inspiring, and I've read over like 1,000 business books, but I'm not going to get carried away. But I'm just saying this because while you're on the phone, you could order on Amazon in 15 seconds. But anyway, that's my unpaid commercial to do for you. But I absolutely love that book. On to you, Becky.
Thanks, Robert. Kara, welcome. Wonderful to have you here. I'm bringing us into the fourth turn here. So listen, I know from personally writing books, it is a labor of love, but I love this title. It's very catchy. Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. Two questions. I mean, you've got a busy life, right? What motivated you to write this book, number one? And then we'll talk about, do people really have self-defeating doubts, and how do you overcome those? So what motivated you to write this book as a busy person entrepreneur?
Oh, no good. You're on mute. Mute.
Kara?
Sorry about that, guys. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we sure can, loud and clear.
Okay, great.
Did you hear the question, Kara?
What's that?
Yeah, did you hear the question?
I did.
Okay,
We're
cool.
all good. So
Yeah.
yeah, it started out as a journal 4 years ago. So I was journaling with no intention to actually write a book or be an author. But what I found as I was out speaking about my company, Hintwater, this is my day job as the CEO of this company, I found that I would run into so many people who would have questions about not only how I did it and sort of took on the beverage industry and have successfully competed against the large soda companies of the world, but also just this concept of that they would have that I was, relentless, or that I took risks and didn't fear failure at all. And I thought, most entrepreneurs that I know, that's not the case at all. In fact, along the way, they would have doubts. They would not really be sure whether or not things were ultimately going to turn out right, but they went ahead and tried. And so it really just stemmed from, a lot of these, misconceptions of really what entrepreneurs are. You always hear about the unicorns and you hear about the failures, but the stuff in between, I've always thought is just like so important for people to learn. So more than anything, I felt like by writing this book and, publishing this book, that I could really help people to know that if I can do it with no industry experience, no sort of like idea of ultimately what I was getting into. And like I said, taking on probably the most competitive giants out there in an industry of over 2,000 beverages. And today, by the way, we're the largest non-alcoholic beverage in the country that doesn't have a relationship with Coke, Pepsi, or Dr. Pepper Snapple, coming from somebody who had no experience and wasn't supposed to be able to do that in 15 years.
Well, wow. And that's incredible. Congratulations. And you get into this more in the interviews, but you were with AOL. Everybody knows AOL. You were executive there. And then you took some time and went from AOL to this whole different industry, body of knowledge, and kind of started, I'm sure, with how am I going to do this, right? So, but entrepreneurs are very successful, I think, in understanding the chatter in their head, which they all have, that can be gremlins, but then they shift that mindset, right? So as I said with Stacey, to no, I can't, but yes, I can, right? So if we could just get a little soundbite of some of your great messaging in the book, how can we mitigate those gremlins, those self-doubts in our head? What are 2 or 3 things that we can do to make that happen?
I think first of all, it's totally normal. And what I learned is I was, the youngest vice president at AOL and one of the few female vice presidents there. And, I was managing a whole group of people. I sort of felt like, that was like the Mecca, right? I'm supposed to like love what I'm doing. And the reality was that I didn't feel like I was learning anymore. Like I had sort of reached this plateau, and I wasn't sure why I was like feeling the way that I was feeling every single day. And I think, I didn't start Hint to actually be an entrepreneur. I started it because I saw this problem around what I was drinking, Diet Coke, and found that it was not making me as healthy as I wanted to be. And when I gave it up, I found that I lost over 20 pounds in 2.5 weeks. My energy levels increased. My skin got better, lots of different things. And I thought, I've got this idea and I know how to fix it just by throwing fruit in water. It helped me to drink water, and that's what I can ultimately help other people do and really change health. And again, like, when you don't actually know what you're doing and you don't have experience, you're getting yourself educated, right? And as long as you believe in yourself that you're a smart person, I really feel like every single day we're gifted with these ideas, these problems. Like, why doesn't this product exist? Why doesn't this service exist? And why not just take this time to go out and ultimately go and try and start it? And maybe you find out a lot of things about it, including the fact that you can actually do something. But I think it really I think the doubts kind of naturally go in when you think about life, when things are hard, when you don't really know what you're doing. I mean, it's kind of stressful, right? But once you actually figure them out, then suddenly, you can kind of pat yourself on the back to say, okay, I got it. It took me a little while, but it's a very, exciting time. And so I think that is really, the game changers that have really gone out, and, women as well as men that have started these companies. That's really what I found has really given me the most inspiration, to sort of know that it's okay to have doubts. It's okay to have fears. It's okay to like even have failures along the way, as long as you like learn from those failures and try
Right.
and figure out step by step how to ultimately move forward.
Right. Well, I'm hearing from you from afar, but I'm hearing that a core value of you is continuous learning and being curious, right? I mean, I think
Totally.
that's a calculus for building and doing great things, right? And being the best that we can be. And who would have thought you land up here but it was your openness and your curiosity, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And I think, I think about the pandemic and something that you guys mentioned, how many people are maybe rethinking their role, maybe, they were furloughed or laid off. And, I think it's no better time to start to think about, not only what do you really want to do, but what are you curious about, right? Like the concept of, oh, I don't know how to write a business plan. Like, if you know how to use Google, you can actually figure out how to write a business plan. And if nothing else, maybe during this time where you're in transition, you actually say, I learned how to write a business plan. And that's pretty darn cool, right? Like, you should
Darn
pat
right.
yourself on the back for that. And I think like that is really what we need to be hearing and doing right now. And I believe that everyone can ultimately do that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I think it's just inspiring people to really look at what possibilities can be and believe in it, right?
Yeah.
So, Robert, I'm going to turn it over to you, my friend.
Okay, so I have to tell you, in knowing Carrots, it is such an amazing story. Just imagine yourself there with like 4 young kids under 6 years old, pregnant, having and just taking like $50,000. That's it, and starting a whole new company against this giant industry. It's amazing how you've done it. So what is it? You know what? Tell the story of how you went in pregnant and approached like Whole Foods. And there's so many things you overcame like this, but I think this is just inspiration that anyone can do it, Kara.
Yeah. So one of the chapters in the book is I found out, I decided to build this company, and I found out that I was pregnant with my 4th child at like shortly after I had already written the business plan, already committed to myself that I was going to go do it. And so I shared with my husband that I was, that this was going to happen. That's a whole other story, that he was shocked. Here I am, a tech executive that's fairly marketable at this point, and I could go do something else, but I have this idea to change health around creating this product. So I developed the product. My timeline was my baby was going to be born on 6 months later. And so I had no idea about how long it would take to actually develop a product. So that really was the date. And so product was delivered slightly longer. It took like 2 weeks longer than what we had anticipated. And so a pallet of water was in my garage. And I thought, I live in San Francisco, so I thought, there's not great parking on the street. I better get the pallet out of my garage so that I could put my car in when I come home with this new baby and my, other little kids. And so anyway, once I wake up on May 27th, I knew I was having a planned C-section at 2 p.m. at my local hospital. My husband said, "So what do you want to do this morning? And do you want to go on a walk? Do you want to go have brunch?" And I said, "No, I want to go get the product on the shelf at Whole Foods." And he's like looking at his watch. He's like, I don't know. And I'm like, "Oh, come on, like you carry the cases, it'll be fine." And so I get to Whole Foods and find the guy that I had been talking to over the course of the 6 months about the product. And the first thing out of his mouth he said, "You're really, really pregnant." And I said, "I am really pregnant." And he said, "Are you going to deliver in the store right now?" And I said, "Well, gosh, I hope not. I mean, I'm having a planned C-section at 2 p.m. So I'm really hoping that I don't do it in the store." And he said, "So how do you know that you're having a planned C-section?" And I said, "Well, there's an emergency C-section, which I've had too. And then there's a planned C-section, which is what I'm having today." And he said, "Oh, I didn't even know that there was such thing as a C-section." And I said, "Yeah, there's like vaginal deliveries, there's, C-sections of all kinds." My poor husband at this point is like backing into the fruit and vegetable section saying, "She's really going there at this point. I can't even believe that she's telling this gentleman where babies are coming from." 15 minutes later, after I had, shared this information, he said, "Thank you so much. Like, I've never had any sisters. Nobody ever talked to me about this. And I really appreciate you taking the time." And I said, "Okay, great. Can you put my product on the shelf or in the cold box?" And he said, "I'll try." And my husband told me to stop selling. He was like, "Come on, we've got to go to the hospital and deliver the baby." And so I didn't even know whether or not he was actually going to get it on the shelf. Some people have asked me, "Do you think you guilted him into like getting it on the shelf and because you were pregnant?" And I don't know, like maybe. The next day we get a call from him in the hospital and he said, "So the 10 cases are gone." And I said, "So who took them?" And I mean, I had only gotten as far as like getting it on the shelf. I didn't think like 10 cases would be sold overnight. And so that was the beginning of Hint 15 years ago. And yeah, it's a crazy story, and I think it really stems from something that we were talking about earlier, where like people actually do like to be educated at every level, and even the guy at Whole Foods merchandising and talking about babies, and that to this day is the course that where Hint started.
Amazing.
That is great. We are coming out of time, but Becky, if you have one quick question.
I had just one quick question. I'm sure all of us on this call are very curious about all of the great CEOs on the call today. But okay, so you've written a book, you do a podcast, you run a very successful company, you're a mother, you're a wife. How do you get renewed? What do you do to refresh, to re-energize yourself? I can just feel the energy on the other end here. So we want your secret sauce.
Yeah, I hike every day. I mean, we left San Francisco. We live in Marin County, like 20 minutes over the Golden Gate Bridge. And I purposely found a house that backs up to 100 acres of trails. So I'm on the trails every single day, which I think is key to sort of like finding your peace, is finding your environment that you really love being in.
Yeah, and we can always make excuse, I don't have time to do it, right? But I think you've got to have a mindset that you're better for yourself and others if you create that 1 hour, 30-minute or whatever space every day for yourself, right? So
Totally.
I think it's making that meeting with yourself. So that's a great piece of advice that we'll pass along to others today. So thank you so much, Karen. It was wonderful to have you here too, and all the panelists. You great information, practices, personal stories and journeys that I think we can all take back and apply back in our day-to-day. So Robert, I will turn it over to you for the wrap-up.
Okay, so for the fun wrap-up, I have a lot of notes, but I'll say like one idea from each person. So what I got from Stacey is you have to make an environment where everyone is able to bring their whole full self to work. That's the goal there. And from Gina, I mean, a big thing that I've interviewed like 750 CEOs before, but your statement that CEOs can't see their blind spots is so true. And that's why you need to bring the whole team together with you. And Joe, a big thing that you've done in every single element there is you talked about how the heart is leveraging relationships. And Kara, I guess from you, we know that you got to hike every day, which is a cool thing. But also, and in knowing you, it's so funny, Becky picked this up. Curiosity is, I think, your core characteristic. So be curious, but also be undaunted. So on that note, I want to thank everyone. And remember, go to WBC's website, wbcollaborative.org, and look up on December 2nd, we're going to have another CEO event, and then again on January 26th. So look at that. 2 minutes to go. We did it. Well, everyone has time. But great being with all of you.
Yeah, and Robert, thank you to all of you. Let's, as you said, shine a light on what women are doing. These 4 women CEOs are extraordinary. And I think from Signet Jury will remember what you said, to celebrate life and celebrate love. And you're all doing it. We're so grateful.
And there's our fearless leader, Edie. Way to go, Edie.